converted to Islam, where his renowned predecessor in the run-up to Pakistan partition, Dilip Kumar, the actor, was born Yusuf Khan in Peshawar and converted to Bollywood under an assumed Hindu name. Ustads such as Bismillah Khan, Vilayat Khan, Bade Ghulam Ali Khan, Amjad Ali Khan, and tabla maestros Allah Rakha and Zakhir Hussain. Cricketers like Tiger Pataudi and Azharuddin, and tennis star Sania Mirza, whom we share. Besides a whole galaxy of influential, highly influential opinion makers, of whom I need mention only three. The group editor of the India Today stable, M.J. Akbar, columnist Saeed Dakhri, and historian Mushirul Hasan, director of the National Archives, and business barons Aziz Premji and Anwar Bhai. Numerous intellectuals and scientists, civil servants and diplomats, judges and chief justices, even chiefs of the armed forces have been Muslim. So too have Muslim politicians and statesmen made their mark on national life, ranging from chief ministers and cabinet ministers to presiding officers of parliament and the presidency itself. The point needs no laboring, except that the Justice Rajendra Sakchar report will immediately be thrown at those who suggest that the lived experience of secular India shows no incompatibility between the two alleged nations of Hindus and Muslims. Yes, indeed, in many respects, the denizens of the Muslim community are worse off than their non-Muslim counterparts, particularly in northern India. Equally undeniable is that while the North Indian Muslim elite largely took off for Pakistan at partition, the vast majority of the ordinary Muslims voted with their feet to remain where they were. Deprived of a middle class and a political leadership, the community has striven to raise itself by its bootstraps. And while there are success stories, there is much leeway to be made up. This points to the need for more effective affirmative action. It emphatically does not mean that Hindu and Muslim cannot live under one national roof. Moreover, it needs to be recognized, in Pakistan of course, but much more in India, that where population transfer did not take place, as in South India, the Muslim community is doing quite exceptionally well and is not resented by the majority community for doing so. Reciprocally, it is little known in India and alas, little booted about in Pakistan except by the Jinnah Institute. How many members of Pakistan's non-Muslim minorities hold positions of distinction and responsibility in Pakistan, not only in the higher echelons of governance, but also in the grassroots institutions of local government, in the civil service, in judiciary, in agriculture, in business, and the arts. Indeed, as my friend, former Foreign Minister Khurshid Kasuri, pointed out in a TV interview with me, in most parts of Pakistan, there are so few Hindus that most Pakistanis of the current generation rarely run into a Hindu. Thus, the question of being anti-Hindu or pro-Hindu simply does not arise. And this perhaps accounts for the warmth and cordiality with which the few Indians who visit Pakistan are invariably received. Partition over, as the Qaid-e-Azam said, before Pakistan was suddenly and unexpectedly emptied of its minorities in the fortnight after its creation. And I quote, it's a very well-known quotation. I see that it's on the cover of the annual report of this institute. You are free. You're free to go to your temples. You're free to go to your mosques or to any other place of worship in this state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion, caste or creed. That has nothing to do with the business of the state. Now I think we should keep that in front of us as our ideal. And you will find that in course of time, Hindus would cease to be Hindus and Muslims would cease to be Muslims. Not in the religious sense, because that is the personal faith of each individual, but in the political sense, as citizens of the state. It could have been Nehru speaking. I do not want to make a polemical point. I simply want to assert here on Pakistani soil that whatever might have been the argument for a Muslim majority state on the South Asian subcontinent at the time of independence and partition, now that Pakistan has been in existence for 60 years and more, the generic argument for Hindu-Muslim incompatibility has lost its shield and transmuted more into national hostility than communal animosity. Yet, 6 decades down the line, Pakistan is caught between what M.J. Akbar has described as the vision of the father of Pakistan and the vision of its godfather, Maulana Maududi, or what Sartaj Aziz has described as the triumph of the Devbandis over the Aligarhians and the Behravis. It is easy enough to make the transition from seeing persistent sectarian violence and right-wing extremists buying the silence of the majority at the point of a gun, or more accurately at the threat of a suicide bomber, to assuming that Pakistan is becoming a medieval caliphate and that is merely a matter of time. To do so, however, would be a grave mistake. It's a mistake repeatedly made in India, but which I have been challenging in India itself as often and wherever I could. Pakistan, I think we all need to recognize, in India, because I think it's self-evident to you here in Pakistan, is a modern nation state. It's now under serious threat from armed religious fanatics, but it is not about to succumb as a society or a state to elements who, even in a moderate democratic garb, have rarely managed to win more than a tiny handful of seats in any democratic election. I will therefore emphatically repeat that it is not communal hostility, but national hostility, not communal animosity, but national hostility that keeps India and Pakistan apart. A matter to be addressed by political and diplomatic action, not theology. Indeed, if religious differences were the root cause, how does one explain Pakistan's excellent relations with, till recently, the only avowed Hindu nation in the world, Nepal, or India's excellent relations with virtually every Muslim country except Pakistan? The generic argument does not hold, but are the scars of history impossible to erase? Those who became Pakistani on 14 August 1947 had been Indians till the previous day. Therefore, there were many in India who argued, perhaps Professor Shishi Gupta most persuasively, that since nothing in language or literature, culture or cuisine, history or even religion distinguished a Pakistani from an Indian, the only way a Pakistani could distinguish himself from an Indian was by asserting that he was emphatically not an Indian, by building the national identity of Pakistan not with positive building blocks, but negatively, by stressing that above all, Pakistan was not India and Pakistanis were Pakistanis precisely because Pakistanis were not Indians. Now, I don't know whether this argument was always a parody, but today, more than 60 years after Pakistan became a reality, those who began life as Indians are a rapidly diminishing breed. I would imagine that some 90% of Pakistanis today have never known any nationality other than their Pakistani nationality. Even as 90% of Indians have never known Pakistan as an integral part of India. Thus, history itself is taking care of history. There is no reason why the nationhood of contemporary Pakistan needs to be built with the cement of anti-Indian or anti-Hindu sentiment. The political reality of 21st century India and Pakistan has substantially replaced the grievances that separated sections of the Hindus and Muslim community in pre-partition India, especially after the outbreak of communal riots in the terrible 20s of the last century. Therefore, I see no reason in principle why generic or historical factors need necessarily stand in the way of reconciliation between the two countries. If, nevertheless, progress in the direction of reconciliation has been slow, then does the problem lie in institutional hurdles on the road to reconciliation? And that brings me to my second set of factors, the institutional. From the Indian perspective, and perhaps also the perspective of a large majority of Pakistanis, the overwhelming role of the military in Pakistan's approach to India is often held to be the principal institutional block to reconciliation. The argument goes that so long as the army, abetted by a complacent civil service, is the effective political power in Pakistan, and so long as the raison d'etre of the huge Pakistan military establishment and what Aisha Siddiqui calls Pakistan's military ink is founded on the assiduous propagation of the threat from India, or so the argument goes, the Pakistan military will never permit hostility between the two countries to be undermined, for that would be to cut off the branch on which the Pakistani defense forces are perched. On the other hand, in Pakistan, it is often claimed that revanchist sentiment in the entire Indian establishment, including the Indian military, is so strong and persistent that the dismemberment of Pakistan in 1971 was only the prelude to the destruction of the rest of Pakistan, whenever this might prove possible. Hence the need for eternal vigilance as the price to be paid for Pakistan's liberty. Both these views appear to me to be a case of the wish fathering the thought. I don't believe that the actual course of India-Pakistan relations validates the view that India cannot deal with the Pakistani military, or that India is still hankering after a restoration of Akhand Bharat. Let me first take the Indian view of the Pakistan military. It is rooted, I think, in General Ayub Khan's coup of 1958. Please remember that in 1958, half a century ago, almost all top officers of the Indian military were either General Ayub Khan's contemporaries or his seniors in the predecessor British Indian Army. My own father-in-law, Major Bir Singh, was without a shadow of doubt General Ayub Khan's closest personal friend. And so when my father-in-law was killed in the Second World War, and later Ayub Khan became president of Pakistan, every time he flew over Delhi on his journeys between West and East Pakistan, he'd have a message sent to my mother-in-law through the air traffic control, asking, Teji, are you okay? But because of this, precisely because of the close family connections and Delhi connections between the top brass of the Indian Army and the top brass of the Pakistan Army, India understandably did not want Bonapartism to spread from the Pakistan Army to their Indian counterparts. General Timayyan's resignation at about the same time as the Ayub coup was considered, perhaps erroneously, as an ominous and dangerous straw in an ill wind that blew no one any good. But it was the Ayub regime that in its earliest days suggested a Trieste solution to Kashmir. That is, let the status quo lie and postpone resolution to a future generation. If I am to credit a story recounted to me when I was serving in Karachi by India's High Commissioner to the Ayub government, Rajeshwar Dayal. I should just add here, I didn't want to put it into the text, that Rajeshwar Dayal was the district magistrate in Mathura when his superintendent of police was Ayub Khan's elder brother, and Ayub himself was commanding in Agra. And I understand that whiskey was obtained more cheaply by the Indian civil service than by the army. So Ayub would regularly drive across from Agra to Mathura to have a convivial evening with Rajeshwar Dayal. This is 1942. And it was indubitable. So what Rajeshwar Dayal told me was that within days of his coming as High Commissioner, it was a curious incident. The agreement was given by the Iskandar Mirza government. But by the time Rajeshwar Dayal physically arrived in Karachi, the Ayub coup had taken place. And Ayub arrived in India Lodge a few days later and told Rajeshwar that for the next 6 months, I have these politicians by the rest of it, please fill up this. He said, I have them by and therefore I'm begging you to ask Jawaharlal Nehru that in these 6 months, we arrive at a settlement with regard to Kashmir, which was a much more live issue then than perhaps it is today. It was a very, very hot issue then. But Nehru refused to respond because he said that he was not going to deal with it in detail. And ultimately, when Nehru did come in 1960, the story is recounted in Kuldeep Nayyar's Distant Neighbors. Ayub, as a very special personal gesture, invited Jawaharlal Nehru to come to Abbottabad. This was in the days before Osama bin Laden. His hometown was Abbottabad. And Nehru behaved so badly in the car between Mari and Mathura that Ayub then fed up and got into a different car to continue the journey from Mathura to Abbottabad. So that's the extent to which sometimes personal prejudices come in the way of finding political solutions. And it was indubitably during the Ayub regime that the Indus Waters Treaty was signed. A treaty that could not be signed with a civil government and which has weathered 3 wars and continues to offer the only effective forum for the resolution of water disputes. Moreover, it was during the Ayub regime that Sheikh Abdullah, Jayaprakash Narayan and others were by all accounts on a successful, or at any rate a promising peace mission to Pakistan when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru suddenly died and the mission got called off. Yes, the battle in the Run of Kutch in April 1965 and Operation Gibraltar in August that year, followed by the September War, took place in the Ayub dispensation. Much of that seems to have been stoked as much by civilian political forces as by the armed forces. You see that I'm being very discreet here, and there is a little bit of the diplomat still left in me. In any case, it was President Ayub Khan who signed the Tashkent Agreement, disagreement having been registered principally by his civilian colleagues. Later, it was during the period of Zia al-Haq that a new impetus was given to people-to-people relations, the most important having been the opening of the Indian Consulate General in Karachi. And during the 3 years that I was in Karachi, we gave 400,000 visas to Pakistan. It was a high point in the India-Pakistan, 4 lakh visas. Our first 1 lakh visas were distributed within 5 months. And when we came to the last 10 of the 1 lakh visas, I called in 10 Pakistani journalists and told them that now you hand it over. And when we reached the 1 lakh visa, I presented the person concerned with a small tin of Darjeeling tea. And the entire crowd burst into slogans saying, Hindustan ke consul Zindabad, Zindabad, yahan koi rishwat nahi, koi pabandi nahi. It's a moment that I will carry with me to my funeral pyre. It was really a beautiful moment. And when in the winter of 1986-87, the temperature started building up over Operation Brass Tacks, and I think Humayun were there then. It was in Zia-ul Haq that Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi found a most effective partner in defusing the threat of war. Now let me again depart from my text to show